Hello, hello, and happy Monday. Happy St. Patrick's Day, in fact, to everybody who's tuning in to us. If you are new in these parts, I'm Clarissa Constantine, and I'm the founder of the ParenTween Connection. And I am very excited to have Miara Shaw with us, who specializes in leadership and wellness. How are you, Myra?
I am doing well for Monday and St. Patrick's Day and all the things, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. So we are rounding out. We're actually a little bit of an overlap from our February theme, which was leadership, but one of our March themes is self care. And so our conversation today is actually going to overlap both of those concepts. So why don't we start for just a moment? Give us a little bit of your background and how it came to be that leadership, especially relative to leadership in teens, as we're talking about today, is something that is important to you and is something that you can support them with.
Yeah, so my background prior to this career, I was in oil and gas industry. I'm located in Houston, Texas, so surprised there that I'm in oil and gas. But I was a trader, one of the nation's few Black female traders for that most of that 27-year career. And so when I transitioned into entrepreneurship, it was really around business development, leadership development, and how I started working with teens is in the summer. I call it the privilege to do offer leadership development to a college prep program. And these students come from all around the world to get leadership development. And so I get to, that is really one of the highlights of my year. But here's what I will say about leadership development with teens. No matter what country, no matter what state they come from, they have very similar fears and concerns.
Hmm.
Same thing. And
Absolutely.
so it's always so fascinating to have them show up and think, they're not going to make friends or they're not going to fit in. They're going to be left out because they all have the same concern. And once I move them past that and really into developing as leaders, talk about the aha moments and the light bulb moments. And when they can become believers in themselves,
Mhm.
I know my work is done and they are off to the races to do amazing things and just to be amazing humans. So that is really one of the highlights of my year to work with them in the summer.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about, like, we're all way more similar than we are different, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Parent-Tween Connection at this point has reach into 3, 4 continents, I think it is,
Nice.
and people ask me, "What's my vision?" And I say global domination. Basically, wherever there's a teenager, I wanna be able to bring support like what you're offering us today to those families because so many of the challenges that teens and families face aren't American expressly. There
No.
are some that are Americanly
Yeah.
or that are uniquely American, um, but we all need to feel seen, heard, understood, validated, respected, appreciated, and to know that we're going to walk into a room and not be the outsider, hopefully, right?
Right. Right.
So, all right. So, we're talking today, folks, about preventing burnout in teen leaders. And I said to Myra before we actually went live today, I said, man, I wish I'd have had you 30 years ago because, oh, did I learn burnout? Did I stay in burnout? And am I still in burnout? I'm in my 40s now, and some of my closest friends are in the same place.
Yeah.
So, you've got some insights that I know we're gearing this conversation toward teenagers, but I'm pretty sure that the parents and the adults tuning in are going to get some key takeaways as well. So, the first point that you mentioned that's key to avoiding burnout is another B word. No, not that B word,
Right.
but boundaries. And
Yes.
we hear so much about boundaries. We actually had a conversation yesterday with JP Marsh, who is a co parenting coach, and he was talking about boundaries as well. So, how do we set them? And the point that you make is that leadership doesn't mean saying yes to everything. I'm really glad my husband isn't tuning in right now. Just saying. So talk to us about this not saying yes and establishing boundaries.
Yeah, the boundaries. I talk also a lot about creating what I call a balanced rhythm in your life. What is the rhythm for your life? I don't talk about work-life balance because that feels like a fixed state. You're trying to get to a certain thing and then it's all going to be okay. We know that's not how life is. And how you create this rhythm is with boundaries. And I often say boundaries are for you, the individual. My
Mhm.
boundaries are not for Clarissa, they're for Myra. And I think when people can understand, especially teenagers, that the boundary that they're setting, which also will include some no's, That's perfectly fine. And because if we're saying yes to everything, it's one of those concepts that we talk about in business. If you're trying to serve everyone, you serve no one.
No one. Hmm.
And I what I give is not for everyone. For example, I love working with teens in the summer for the college prep program. I would not be signing up for said program for elementary age students.
Hmm.
It's not my lane. It's not what I'm
Hmm.
great at. I know other facilitators that love working with the babies. So I would be saying no to that and referring them to a facilitator who's great at that. And so that's the power of me being able to use my yes and my no with a boundary so that I can show up and be the best that I can give. If I'm
Hmm.
trying to facilitate leadership for elementary age kids, yeah, I could do it, but that's not going to be my best self. And so that no allows me to show up as my best self with the boundary, and I can be as great as I can be. And I don't have to worry about another that I'm not doing something I'm supposed to do with my no. Clarity.
Hmm.
I'm clear about what I'm assigned to do and who my
Hmm.
audience is and who I'm supposed to serve. And no, for teenagers, that takes some work. You
Hmm.
shouldn't be worried that you don't have that all figured out at 15. It's okay.
Sure.
But if you keep serving and keep listening to that inside voice, what is it? It's going to light up when you're doing things that are aligned with what you're supposed to do. And when it's not in
Absolutely.
alignment, you're going to kind of be like, I don't want to do that. I'm dragging. That's not good for me. It's pulling your energy down. Listen to what your body, your heart is telling you on those things.
Well, and a thought that comes to me at this point, Myra, is it's important for the adults in the world to model for the teenagers, right? And,
Absolutely.
so many parents, especially in the parent teen dynamic directly, parents are like, they don't listen to me, they don't pay attention to me. Okay, maybe they don't obey. Well, I mean, we won't
Right.
talk about the difference between listening and obedience, but that's a different
Yes.
conversation. They watch.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, do they watch? And so, first of all, to the parents listening, setting a boundary for yourself and listening in, like Myra is saying, is really impactful to the kids in your life because they see you setting those boundaries. When they see you going, no, I can't support Girl Scouts anymore. No, I'm not going to be the dance mom. No, I'm not going to martial arts with you. No, I'm not. Like, I just can't do that.
Right.
So many parents that I see feel like they're letting their kids down when they say, no, I can't do that. When in fact, the other side, I think, is at least equally true. Like maybe your kids are disappointed that you can't be there in that capacity for some reason, but you're also doing them the service of recognizing, look, this I'm just tapped out. I'm at my wits' end. I'm at my calendar's end. I'm
Mm-hmm.
at my mental health end, and this is just not okay for me anymore. Or maybe I'm not at the end. But I see the end looming, and I'm going to say no before the end hits. And I
Yeah.
like the way that you said the boundary is about us because it's so many people think, well, the boundary is like, well, if you do this, then I'm gonna. And that's not it. It's, if anything, it's if you do this, I'm gonna for me. And it's
Mm-hmm.
how it's about my behavior and how I choose to continue to engage or not.
Yeah.
Do you have a key aside from like telling our kiddos, listen to what lights you up, listen to what energizes you,
Mm-hmm.
and be okay with saying no? What are some of the ways that they can recognize that? Because if you had have said that to me when I was 14, Myra, I'd have been like, but I like it all. And the truth is, I'm
Right.
ADHD and I really do like it all. But just because I like it all doesn't mean I can do it all.
Right. So here's an important piece, and this is something that's also super helpful for parents. Work life integration, school life integration. When a parent is modeling a good behavior on, I am exhausted, or I also want to cook you a healthy dinner, so you're going to have to go to practice alone, or whatever that looks like. I think we as parents, and we were guilty of this as parents as well with we now have 4 young adults. We want to manage everything for our kids to make their lives so much easier, right? That's
Hmm.
what we're processing in our head. But the fact is, we are not teaching them how to create good school life integration because we're
Hmm.
telling them when to get up and when to be somewhere and it's time to get ready to go and all of these things, instead of saying you have practice at 6. It takes us 30 minutes to get there. We're going to leave at 5:30. we've got to let the students start figuring out, okay, well, if we're leaving at 5:30, I can't possibly get off my game at 5:28, get dressed and ready to go, right? And if you will let them figure some of these things out and even fail at them, right? So if they don't get dressed and done until 5:40, that means they're going to be 10 minutes late for practice.
Mm-hmm.
I was ready, you weren't ready. So I
Mm-hmm.
think helping, allowing our students, our teens, to learn some of things earlier than we learned. We didn't learn them until we were adults, trying to
Mm-hmm.
balance things out. We just didn't know, right?
In a lot of cases, yeah.
But if we have the ability, the tools, the technology for sure, to allow a teen to set an alarm on their phone so they know when they need to be prepared to get in the
Mm-hmm.
vehicle so we can leave on time for them to get where we're taking them. I don't have
Right.
practice, you have practice,
Correct.
right?
Well, and that speaks. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it, is that the work life integration or school life integration for teenagers, if parents would allow them, I know it's such an uncomfortable word, to learn to fail earlier, then
Mm-hmm.
they know. So, okay, if I didn't get ready on time this week and I was 10 minutes late for practice, then I got in trouble with my coach and had to run extra laps. I had the consequences of that. The next
Mm-hmm.
week, that teen is going to go, if they're sharp, huh, I better be dressed and ready to leave at 5:30 so I can get to practice on time. But if
Yep.
you're the mom in the kitchen yelling, get ready, it's time to go, blah, blah, they're just like, they become immune to all of that, right?
They
But if
really
they
do. Yeah.
can recognize the consequences of not being ready, the consequences are not from me as the parent, it's from the coach and from your team, then that teaches a little bit better lesson that they can get before they become adults. Because you're right, if we don't figure this out early, we're 20 and we're living out of balance, and we're 30 and we're 40 and we're burnout and we're overwhelmed and we're exhausted all the time as
All,
adults. Yeah,
yep.
it's a crazy
Well,
cycle.
and that plays right into the second point that you wanted to talk about, which is time management
Yeah.
strategies. And what the thought that comes up for me is, the roles that you and I get to play in these young people's lives is that of a
Hmm.
coach,
Yeah.
right? Where we can, and really truly, I think parents have the opportunity to do this and maybe don't realize that that's more the role that they're playing in the teenage years than in the
Hmm.
younger years. And taking that time, like I'm an SAT and ACT coach of 27 years, and part of what I do with my students is I'll literally go, look, I need you to commit 15 minutes a day. On Monday, what's that? When's that going to be? On Tuesday, when is that going to be? Because I can just say it to them and they'll be like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But most of them aren't going to necessarily think about when that 15-minute slot needs to happen. And then they end up with 3 hours of homework on a Saturday when we have an appointment on a Sunday, and they've lost the week of practice.
Right.
So, what other strategies do you have? So, like walking through that thought process, first of all, like verbalizing. And I like the fact that you're saying, you know, have them participate in the planning. How long is it going to
Hmm.
take you to get dressed? How long is it going to take you to do what you need to do in the bathroom or whatever, right?
Right.
Or if you're going to need to eat, what are you going to make? And how long is it going to take you to make it? How long is it going to take you to eat it? When are you going to eat it? But not just on the front end. I like the fact, Myra, that you also alluded to a retrospective
Hmm.
almost, right? Like, okay, how did that work out?
Right.
Because that's what they do in sports. We go back and like, and I mean, I'm a musician, I'm a singer. We go back and we look at our score sheets. Athletes go back and
Absolutely.
look at film and go, hey, what worked, what didn't work? Why wouldn't we bring that into the family dynamic and be like, hey,
Yeah.
what went successfully, what didn't?
Yeah.
What other strategies do you recommend to families in that, or in order to achieve that school life integration? I like
Yeah.
that concept.
Yeah. And with the time management, allowing the teens to do it. Again, I know parents, we we just want to make everything so soft and so cushiony. We want to protect them from what we think we're protecting them from, right? But it doesn't do a young person any good to get through high school, get ready to go off to college, and they have not learned time management, because no one at the college level is saying, hey, it's time to be in your science class. You're
Mhm.
just not there, right? There are no
Mhm.
refunds. They don't really,
Right.
it's just you lost your money, right? So,
Mhm.
again, I think this whole process is allowing teens to be more involved in their daily life process. right? We started pretty early with our teens. And here's a thing I would say to them frequently: your lack of planning does not constitute an emergency for me.
Mhm.
I, if you forgot you had something going on, I'm not getting ready to stop and start running around like a crazy person to help you get back on task.
Mhm.
Listen, if you forget that once or twice, you're going to go, oh, mom needs that information at least 3 or 4 days in advance so we can
Mhm.
get this coordinated. Let them have the consequences of not managing their time. Now, different children learn different ways.
Sure.
Some children you can say, okay, we need to leave at 5:30, so you need to get prepared so you can be ready out the door. Some children you have to say, okay, let's talk about this. It takes you a little bit longer in the bathroom. We need to leave at 5:30. Here the thing, like, have a whole conversation about it. And I know it's difficult sometimes, but having that conversation, us moms, before we're yelling about it. Oh my
Mhm.
God, you're late again. We're gonna be late now. I gotta, like, they're so immune to that, right? But having that conversation and letting your child know, I'm gonna be ready to go at 5:30. So whenever you come out, we're gonna get there. And if they're late, they're late. Again, what we do
Mhm.
is we make up the difference. We start, we speed, we do all the things as you're like, okay, we're gonna do it. Just let, and again, we're trying to keep them from failing. But the failure, I always call it a lesson. The
Mhm.
sooner they can get that, the better time management they're going to have. Why are they going to be better? Because they're going to see the consequences or the
Mhm.
results of managing the time properly or not. If they don't manage their time properly, but we bail them out, they're still not getting it, right?
Sure.
So the
Right.
time management, if it's a child that you can say, here's what I need you be ready at 5:30, we're all good. But sometimes you have to have a whole conversation around it. If especially if a child is ADHD, right? You've got to give
Mhm.
some intentional steps of what needs to be happening, what they need to be doing. So you're setting them up for the best success that they can have, and they know that you're partnering with them. But if they don't make it, okay, you're going to be 5 minutes late.
Mhm.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, and there's a couple of things that come to my mind is like, okay, we're trying to prevent a failure. What is that failure? And
Mhm.
why does it bother us?
Yeah.
Right? Is it
Yeah.
that we don't want them, and I've seen this in a lot of families. Do we not want people thinking poorly of the adults in the family because
Hmm.
we don't have our acts together, for example?
Right.
Or we don't want them thinking badly about the kids, or we just don't want the kids to start getting picked on or whatever by their teammates. But then think about like, okay, what's the consequence if they are late?
Yeah.
What's the end of the
They'll be
story? Now,
fine.
if we're talking truancy, right, that's a different
Absolutely.
conversation.
That's
Like,
different.
when we're talking
Yeah.
like, cold hard money or we're talking legal things,
Hmm.
like but those situations start
With the
with being
smaller
on time to
things,
practice.
with the
Exactly.
non-consequential, not non-consequential, because the coach is going to get on you if you're late, and they should,
Sure.
right? But I think one of those things, as parents, we have this notion we always want to give our children more or better than what we got,
Sure.
right? And I'm in my early 50s, so I grew up in the era where we got to run around in the back. We just had to be home before the street lights, right? So you knew that was the timeline. That's how we managed the time. We didn't have cell phones and all these other things. You knew you just had to be back at home at a certain time. How far we went, parents didn't really know, right?
Mhm.
But we live in a much different world, and so I think we have this, we want to give our children so much more and all these things. But I think we as parents have to shift that mindset. Some of the things we're trying to give our children, it's not better for them.
Mhm.
Them not knowing how to manage their time as a teenager
Mhm.
is not good for them, because that only continues to get worse. And they're
Right.
now they're the adult that's 10
Right.
minutes late everywhere. They can't get to work on time, right? Those things start to have real consequences, versus if we as a parent can just let ourselves live through the
Mhm.
failure or the lesson at 13 that they didn't get, in the example downstairs on time to get to practice, and now they're
Mhm.
late and the coach is on them. That's a much easier lesson to learn than they can't keep a job because they can't ever get
Take it.
anywhere on time. right?
Absolutely.
We've
Yep.
got, as parents, we've got to be able to let ourselves live through those moments for our students.
Sure. Well, and then let me also give a shout out to folks who are, who specialize in this kind of coaching. If the
Yeah.
parent is feeling like, man, I suck at this myself, how the heck am I supposed to teach my kids some of this? And some of it we've learned through the school of hard knocks,
Mm-hmm.
right? But at the same time, like there are executive function coaches and there, leadership
Yes.
coaches like yourself, and there are people who can help with this to say, hey, look, if you don't feel like it's your jam, you don't feel like it's your strong suit, there are resources. There's a boatload of YouTubes and whatnot out there to help with this kind of thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Myra, let me go to the last point that you wanted to make, which is creating a safe space for the teens to express their stress and ask for support. One
Yeah.
of the things that I see in adults, especially in moms, is we don't speak up soon enough when the ever loving, what, starts hitting the fan. Or like we see
Mm-hmm.
it building up and it's not quite to, fan throwing it around the room stage, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not far and we still can't advocate for ourselves as effectively as we might like. And if we can model that for our kids, maybe we can help prevent them from falling into that same pattern. So, how do we create that space for them?
Yeah, I think for us parents is one of the most important things is not to completely wig out meltdown when a child comes and says, I'm having this problem or this stress or I'm feeling whatever they're feeling, right? And this is something parents have to learn. I've had to get better at this, even having young adult children at this point, is when they come with something, the biggest thing we can do in the moment is listen. Parents, don't feel like you have to wear the solve everything hat, because oftentimes they're not coming to you necessarily for you to solve or just fix it. Sometimes, just like us as adults, they need to be able to just say it. They need to just be able, in a safe place, no, I can come say this to my mom or my dad and they're not going to have a whole meltdown and blow up on me. This is a
Mhm,
safe place for me to say, this is what I'm feeling, or this is what I'm thinking. So I think the very first, most important step is create a safe place so that your teen can come to you and say what they need to say. And here's
mhm.
a question that I often use. I even use it with adult friends now, because it's one of those things when you're a coach and a facilitator, people just come to you with stuff, right?
Mhm.
And when someone comes to me with something, the first question I really ask is, how may I support you?
Mhm.
Because sometimes all they want is just a listening ear. And they don't need me to give, here are the top three things you can do to solve this. They really know what they need to do. They
Mhm.
just need it to be able to have an outlet. So if it's a teenager, ask them, what would you like me to do? And maybe they don't know. And then you can figure it out in a conversation together.
Mhm.
But if they say, nothing, mom, I just needed to be able to say that and get that out. Okay. Then
Mhm.
you've done the important thing you needed to do as a parent by
Mhm.
listening. That's it. I think as we as parents, we want to solve. Again, we want to make it cushioned. We want to
Sure.
soften the blow, which is normal for a parent. But here's one of the greatest things I've seen teenagers struggle with is resilience, because they've never had to use the resilience muscle because there's a parent or guardian always solving for them. And they
Mhm.
don't know how to solve challenges, barriers, obstacles, and failures. They don't
Absolutely.
know. And the older they get without that resilience muscle, it becomes more overwhelming for them. So I'm often saying to parents, let them figure it out.
Mhm.
Sometimes a failure, I always call a failure a lesson. There's
Mhm.
something your future self is going to need. And how much better is it for a teenager to get that lesson at 16 versus 36?
Absolutely.
Right? So that resilience muscle is only, I always say resilience is a muscle and it's
Mhm.
only built when you use it. So parents,
Sure.
let them develop their resilience muscle. They are
Mhm.
going to need it. And really, I think that's why we're seeing, sadly, suicide rates continuing to rise,
Mhm.
because it's when these young folks start to get, out of the home and they encounter something that's, just a life challenge. The resilience muscle is not there to be able to handle it, and they feel like their only out is to end it, right?
Mhm.
That's not what we want. We want them to start
Sure.
building those resilience muscles as early as little bitty ones, Let them
Mhm.
figure some things out, right? I
Mhm.
think we as a generation have so much more oftentimes than our parents had for us. And so we
Mhm.
use our money, our knowledge, our access to technology and we start solving. We just solve.
Sure.
And they just
Absolutely.
haven't built the resilience muscle. And when I have a session that I do on resilience with teens, that is some of the most authentic conversations and
Yeah.
tears that I
Yeah, for
have with
sure.
students because it's like someone has said out loud, you have permission to have some failures. It's a
Mhm.
part of the journey. I tell them, if you're not failing, you're not doing it right.
Right. You're not learning, you're not growing.
You're not growing at all. And you have permission to do that. And your resilience muscles helps you overcome that failure. And you're going to be amazing and you're going to be fine, even with those
Right.
failures in your journey.
Well, and that also carries on into, like, perfectionism as we become adults,
Absolutely.
and
So
fear
many
of going for
things.
things that aren't guaranteed. There's so gosh, we could talk for a whole long time on that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna work to wrap this up for this
Okay.
portion of our conversation. For folks who are tuning in, or if you're catching the replay, we are going to head over to Parent Tween Village to have a second conversation on handling teen stress and anxiety, specifically relative to leadership and school. But before we go, Myra, I always round out our conversations by asking our professionals rather, which of our foundations of connection rings most true for them. So, for folks
Okay.
tuning in who aren't familiar with our foundations of connection, these are kind of the underpinning of everything that we do at Parent Tween Connection. They came out of a conversation I had with myself some time ago saying, why is it that young adults are more likely to talk to somebody like me, somebody who's outside of their nuclear family, than they are to talk to someone within their nuclear family, or even like grandparents or aunts or uncles?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that we on the outside, so to speak, are able to offer that's a little bit more challenging to present in the in person, immediate, like more intimate family dynamic? And so the foundations of connection are: create a safe place, observe, non judgment, nod and smile, explore, challenge your truths or curiosity, take your time, innovate, own your own story, and nurture.
Non-judgment.
Tell me more.
When I'm working with teens in the summer for the college prep program, I see these students for a total of 8 days. They're in a 9 day program. I see them about 5 days total. And that 5 days, it might be about an hour and a half each time. I think the thing at the end of that 8th day and sometimes pour out something they've been carrying in their heart that they just need to tell me. They need to give it to me. Is because I've stood in front of them for these different sessions and really presented myself in a non-judgmental way.
Hmm.
Like, we're not all perfect. I share some of my own failures. I share where I've tripped it up and gotten it wrong and all the things. I'm not afraid to say that. And I think that clears a path for them to be able to also come say, oh, maybe Myra, I was struggling with this, and I didn't feel comfortable telling my parent or my friend or whatever, but I can come tell you, right?
Hmm.
And it's because the non-judgment really allow teens, oh my God, that's like a nightmare. They don't want to be judged. They
No,
really
no, they
want to
don't.
fit in. They really want to be a
Hmm.
part of the crowd. And when they realize that they can get that, man, it really makes it just a little bit easier for them to come and open up freely and share some of the things that are troubling them from the inside,
Hmm.
and they can have those conversations.
Awesome. I love it. Myra, if folks are interested in connecting with you for coaching for your program that's launching soon, I hear, where do they find you and how do they get information?
Yeah, so they can find out everything about me at mirashaw.com, Miara Shaw.com. It has all of the things about the Leadership Wellness Circle, which is for adults. That will be launching in April. But they are also under my speaker tab. There's a information specifically for working with students, and they can read. There's forms on all these different pages. They can fill it out, and that'll get it back to my team, and I will reach out to them.
Awesome. And we are going to head over to ParenTween Village. For those of you who are not yet members of ParenTween Village, you can learn more at parenttweenconnection.com/ParenTween Village. Also, those all only have one T in them, in between parent tween. And if you are catching us on YouTube or on LinkedIn, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or follow us on LinkedIn so that you get notified about other upcoming conversations we have with professionals like Myra. And Myra, thank you. I will see you at ParenTween Village shortly.
Sounds good.